Greetings and welcome to this episode of Everyday Enchantment. I am your host, Stacey Andon. And as I was just saying behind the scenes, I woke up excited today because I get to welcome you to Belinda Smith, the guest on today's podcast. Belinda is a master of so much magic in the world, music, coaching. She's a beacon of humor and authenticity. I always gravitate to her energy when she's out on the socials because she just has such a realness about her that I know you're going to fall in love with today. And along those lines, today's episode, we are going to be talking about grief. How do you navigate, especially in the holiday season when things feel even a little bit more tender? Belinda and I both lost our mothers a couple of years ago due to very different circumstances, but we were both kind of grieving online together. And it just felt like this beautiful bond of support that we had. And I want to talk about it with all of you today. Welcome.
Hi.
Did I miss? I'm sure I probably missed all sorts of accolades because you are just one of the most phenomenal beings on this planet. I really mean everything that I say, that your energy just draws me in.
I love that. You're still on my payroll, right? I haven't.
Exactly.
Okay. Need to make
Just
sure.
make sure you, need a little,
Right.
bump, a little affiliate bump in there.
Right.
So I know I'm laughing. We both kind of been laughing backstage a little bit. And interestingly enough, the topic is kind of probably more serious, intense, what have you. But we both have a sense of humor, I think, that helps us navigate things that can almost seem, I don't want to speak for you, but I mean, when my mother died, it was like, how do I even get up and like, this is my reality right now, and navigate this day, the next day, the day after that. And I know you and I, like I said, we kind of had this, I was watching your journey because it was helping me in my own journey. And I know it's been about 4-ish years for us, but still, I feel like this time of year, the people in our lives that we've held the closest that are not here anymore, like that energy of them, and tell me if I'm wrong, but the energy of them feels like it comes back up in those moments, especially the quiet moments. I mean, not November and December probably are not necessarily like what we would think of as being particularly quiet, but I find like in a morning or an evening when things are quiet, my grief kind of comes up and out in ways that sometimes very unexpected.
Definitely. Even your mom passed in 19 or 20?
19.
19.
Like,
Okay.
and like fall, like September.
Yeah, we were really close because my mom died October 7th.
Yeah.
So yeah, like even speaking of it being unexpected, 2 days ago I was dropping someone off at the airport, and there was a woman, like a daughter, like holding her mom like so tight, and she hugging her goodbye, and like I just started crying. And out of nowhere, I had no idea it was coming, but the woman had a shirt on, kind of like something that my mom would have worn. Yeah, I'm just sitting there, I'm like crying. My friend's like, "Oh my gosh, are you okay?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, it's just what we do."
Yeah. And I think that we don't talk about it. I mean, you and I talk about it, but I don't think it's like that is a very, like, I've cried in Old Navy. I've cried all over the place, and I have now made space, like you said, it's like it's okay. Like it's perfectly, like, even though it's unexpected, allowing ourselves to process in that moment, a moment of sadness, missing whatever it is. I also think my brain wants to get all analytical all the time, and grief, like, is like, that is definitely the emotions, like, keep your brain out of this
You can do absolutely nothing you can do. So, in your experience, did you find that yours was linear, like with the 5 stages of grief? You know, they were like, "Oh, this, and this is going to happen."
No. Although there were moments where I was like, if I was really angry, I was like, ah, all right, I'm in that. But my whole life, Belinda, and this was no exception, is the non-linear, like, I am the outlier of like, oh, if this is typical for how most people do something. And then
Mhm.
there's Stacey Andon over here that's like, ah. And I don't know if you know this, but my mother came, she, first of all, I'm a medium, and she came through to talk to me 2 days after she passed. And I said, I am not ready to have a conversation with you. Now,
Oh,
my
wow.
mother passed in a very different context than yours.
Mhm.
My mother, it was a much more volatile situation, and so I was like, I'm not ready. And she kept trying to come through, right, to talk to me in the next couple months, and I was like, I need time just to be with whatever this is. And I think for me, when I was really in some of the messier parts of the grieving, I realized that for me, I always held out hope, a part of me, that we would, like, my mother would come running across a field and be like, Stacy, I love you. I'm sorry. I'm the mother that you wanted, right? All of these things that never happened. And when she died, it wasn't just like losing her and all the messiness, but the hope, right? This idea that something could, like, at any moment, right? This part of me did. It was like at any moment she could call me and she could, for apologize for everything she's done, and we're gonna have this beautiful relationship. And so what I've found over the years is that on Mother's Day, on the holidays, when people are all up in each, like that moment in the airport you're talking about, those are the places that really still break my heart. And I don't know, it's like I've figured out a way, I think, to be with it so it's not monopolizing me, or, and yet it is this very, very tender scar around, again, not just the physical loss, but this loss of kind of, a mother wound for me, for lack of a better way, I guess, of saying it.
Have you been able to talk to her? Have you let her in to talk to
Yes,
you? Yes.
I did speak, well, she came through 2 acquaintances of mine
Mhm.
who had beautiful messages for me, and, and she was like, "Look, this is why all this weird stuff," because there was a lot of weird stuff that happened on the other side too, that I
Mhm.
won't speak of because it has to do with my father and he's still alive. But the idea was like, "I love you. You, like, you're, all of this." I can remember a moment, my husband and I were at a Christmas, like, outdoor tree lighting thing, maybe a year or 2 after she had passed, and she came through. She and I had gone when I was going through my divorce. I had said to her, "Look, I need different memories than, like, all of these things that were anchored to my first marriage."
Mhm.
So she, me, and my father went to this tree lighting, something different we'd never done before. We kind of made it into this beautiful ritual for a couple of years. And so she shows up while there's like the fireworks are going on, and I am crying because she's like, I am so, everything I wanted to hear right on the, when she was a human. She's like, Stacey, I am sorry. Like, we were having this profound spiritual moment. Everybody else is singing and caroling, you name it. And here I am. It was almost like, like couldn't even pay attention to anything else going on. My husband standing next to me had no clue what at all was happening, but we had some very cathartic moments like that together.
Mhm.
Um, and actually, I feel like she's very much my maternal grandmother, who my maternal grandmother died right before my mother died, and she was like 94, and she was like my one family member who I felt like loved me, got me, kind of in my corner.
Mhm.
And she has been a guide for me since she's passed. It's almost like, in the Star Wars movie where Darth Vader, like, is it Return, where they all kind of
Mhm.
reunite on the other
Yeah.
side. It felt like my mom and my grandmother kind of did that and do that for me.
Mhm.
And so I have all sorts of conversations with them now, and it doesn't feel, I don't know, something's changed, right? Whatever it has been in the human, it's shifted for me now in my relationship with her. And I don't know, how about you? Do you feel like your mom comes to you?
I am I don't know. Well, I will say, like, my mom died of cancer. It's a very rare kidney disease, and so just kind of she made it 3 years and should have only made it 9 months, but kind of being in the last 6 or so weeks of her life, there was a lot of things happening that I couldn't explain. Um, so, well, also, she was home on hospice. She was only home for like 2 days before she died. But like within maybe the 30 minutes leading up to her death,
Mhm.
it was just time. It was like it was just time. And so she wasn't getting better. She wasn't going to come back. My brother was able to come in. So my dad and I were like everything. And so the last few minutes, I always heard they're like, you have to give them permission to go.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, that's more for me than it is for them, whatever. Turns out, like, just like you were saying, that there's some sort of spiritual conversation that starts being had. Like I knelt down by the bed and nobody was there, it was just me and her. And I was like, Mom, it's okay. It's okay to go. And then there was like this weird spiritual conversation that we started having. Like she was like, I can't go because your dad doesn't know how to do anything. I'm like, I'll take care of it. But what about Aaron, my brother? What about him? And it was just on and on. And dad doesn't know how to fold the sheet. Okay, well, I don't know how to fold a fitted sheet either. I've seen the videos, but I still can't
Me
do
too. I'm
it.
with you.
I'm just like, this is not a hill I'm gonna die on. I'm just gonna
Yeah.
let there be an
Yep.
answer somewhere. It's not gonna be me. But yeah, there was this weird thing happening that we were just having this conversation, and about 15 minutes into it, my brother was like, "What's going on?" Because she already had that rattle. They call it the death rattle in West Virginia. I'm not sure if that's everywhere.
No, that's everywhere. My mother-in-law just passed in April, and I helped her transition, and she was in hospice. So that more traditional path,
Mhm.
I'm very familiar
Yeah,
with.
okay.
Yeah.
So that was that I mean, that had started the day before, and I didn't exactly know what it was. I just kept thinking she needed to clear her throat, but that was not it. So, it was like, I probably talked to her in our head. It wasn't it was just all happening up here.
Yeah.
For 20 minutes before my brother was like, "Okay, something's happening." Then he called my dad in. The hospice nurse happened to walk in, and she's like, "Oh," she's like, "You're probably looking at 15 minutes." And
Wow.
so it was really interesting to have kind of talked her into leaving. It was like, "Oh, but I didn't mean to do," but it was also like, it was time for her to leave in peace.
Yeah.
And I will say, I'm not a medium, but was interesting, and it's still here and there when I'll have dreams about her and we're fighting. I mean, yelling at each other, the meanest, well, not the meanest, but to us, I mean, really angry things. And just recent, I mean, and mom and I had a good relationship, but recently they've just kind of started to calm down. You just like, oh,
Interesting.
but one of the most difficult ones that she ever early on in my dreams. She was a very fundamental Christian, believed her entire life, and I dreamt that I was on a couch with her. They all meant so all the couches were from the family somewhere, and I just looked at her. It's like she knew she was dead. I knew she was dead, and I was like, Have you seen Jesus yet?" And she put her shoulder on or her head on my shoulder and started crying, and she said no. And so that was like one that it took a long time for me to kind of move on from. So
Yeah.
I just don't want to, I think it's important that everyone knows, just as you said, grief is not linear. It's
No,
more like a tornado that, like, you may go through all 5 of the stages in 10 minutes, and they're gonna come back around. They're gonna come back
that's
around,
so
and it's just
true.
natural. And then, where there are conversations that do happen on a spiritual level that you have no idea that are gonna happen.
I
So
couldn't agree more with you. And it's interesting too. I love that you brought up this idea of dreaming because the first time I dreamt of my mother after I was really freaked out. I don't even remember what the dream was, but I was like, now she shows I'm like I having dream and it's like it's a little bit more, I want to say normalized because it's happening. But when
Mhm,
you
mhm.
first see somebody, it's like, whoa, my whole reality
Yeah.
was struggling with that. And I actually lately I've been having the craziest of dreams. And thankfully my mother is not necessarily front and center, but my family, there's lots of things going on, I guess, that I'm working through in
Mhm.
my dream states. But that can be very also emotionally charged. You wake up and you've been doing something, having a conversation, and I don't know, maybe even again, if we're missing people or thinking about them even more this time of year, maybe they even come up even more so in our dreams. And how do you navigate? I try as best that I can to give myself a little bit of space in the morning so I'm not just rushing out of bed knowing if I have a dream, I have a little bit of like, okay, I can lay there and just like, again, soothe my own nervous system around whatever may or may happen. And then I always go for a walk, as most everybody who knows me, in the morning, and
Mhm.
I'll process whatever I've dreamt about or have conversation. I know I always used to think, oh my gosh, I'm out there in the woods talking to people, but it is what it is. And I find quite solace in being able to have, again, the I've lost, and I know you've lost other people. Like, I lost a close friend to cancer a couple years ago. We talk almost every day. My mother-in-law, who also had difficulty leaving, for a variety of reasons, and needing that permission to go. It's like having all these conversations. And personally, I don't know. I don't know if people have to be a medium. I think if we're open, right, to having these relationships and what have you, that any of us, right, can have these connections. Sometimes I think when somebody first passes, it's so raw. The grief is so raw. It's hard. That's what I would say. I was like, nope, not ready for this. And
Mhm.
I think that is a really important point, that we're all going to do it a little bit differently. Like, me watching you wasn't like, oh, I need to do it like Belinda way, but it just gave me permission to be like, it's okay to be messy, and it's okay 4 years later, 5 years later, 20 years later, whenever it is. And other people don't have to manage that for me. They don't have to understand it. Like, I don't need to go explaining things. And I think that, again, for women on this planet, we feel like we're always having to explain ourselves and tone down the emotions. And to me, I'm like, nope, not doing it anymore. Old Navy, watch out. It might have a meltdown.
Yeah. It's so weird because I was really, like, never a crier. I mean, not that I didn't feel things deeply, but I just didn't ever really cry that much. And, now I'm like, "You want me to cry with you? Did you drop a nickel? Here, I got it. We can cry." Like, it doesn't matter. I can cry at any point. So, I don't know, mom would be shocked. She knows, I don't know.
She's watching, I'm
I
sure, has some
know. It's like,
clue and say, "Oh my goodness, Belinda," right?
right? Who are you and what have you done with my daughter?
Yeah.
Like, she
Have
cries all
you
the time.
have you found that over the, like, again, this 4 years, that your grief has kind of changed, like, your own kind of pathway, beyond just kind of like these stages? Have you noticed things that have been different over the years, or things that have kind of stayed the same as you've kind of navigated this?
One of the things that, here's what I don't know, do you know Karen C.L. Anderson?
Oh, very
Okay,
well. And
so
she's been on this
oh,
podcast.
she has.
She
Oh,
has, yes.
so one of the things she told me, I think it was in a Facebook post where we're talking about the grief, and I'm not gonna be able to say it just like she did, but
That's
it's like
okay.
grief never stops. So it doesn't end. So if you picture like a jar of grief, and then you start to picture sort of your life and your love and your growth around that jar. So
Mm,
that never leaves. It's just that you're able to somehow grow around it with it still there. And so I thought that was a really beautiful analogy because that's a
absolutely.
lot of what I have. Um, Now, as far as the holiday season, I
Yeah.
hate it. Just, like, straight up hate it. Um,
Before, but always or now?
oh, no, but my
Yeah.
mom was Christmas, and
Yeah.
she was my grandmother's, and when they passed, it was mom, and that was her this was her holiday. Me and my brother were coming home, it was all of it, and so, yeah, pretty much hate it, but we my brother and I have tried to make some adjustments to make it our
Mhm,
own. You
mhm,
know, "Oh, we're gonna do this on this day instead. Oh, we're gonna eat this instead." I
yeah.
think eventually, he and I will choose to go overseas every Christmas
Mm,
just to change the landscape, because
yeah.
ultimately we can't repeat. Whatever the holiday season is for whoever, you know,
Mhm.
Jewish, Kwanzaa, Christian, all the different things
Yeah.
that are celebrated through that. It seems like most everyone has some sort of a ritual, whether you are with your biological family, your logical family, you wanna be, but there's some sort of a ritual, and the first thing that we could really figure out what to first thing that we could address quickly was, let's change it up. We're never gonna recreate that, so let's make an adjustment and hold that sacred.
I love that because, I mean, for a variety of reasons, not because of death, that my holidays have been completely disrupted. And again, you kind of have to grieve that's its own little kind of subsection of grieving, right? Like Christmas was, my mother, and it's like, and now it's not going to be like that anymore. And it doesn't mean that, we're just fall into a hole, but at the same time, it's like, how do you hold that sacred? And I'm with you, because that was kind of what I learned going through my first divorce, because I'd been with him for 20 years. Everything, especially around the holidays, was anchored to the two of us and all these rituals. And I was like, I can't do it anymore. I have to let it go
Yeah.
and hold those memories, right? Like you said, kind of in that jar, but not try to make now, like, just be real with myself and be like, this is not that. And so what do I do instead? And I will say, for a couple of years, it was quite messy. And I probably I haven't been I mean, I'm a crier, but I haven't spent as much too many tears. Maybe that period in my life, because I cried a lot. There was like, I remember at one point, like, getting in the car, like, oh, somebody needed something, right? So I'm running to the grocery store that's still open on Thanksgiving, and I'm calling my best friend, and I am sobbing. And I was like, I can't do this. I can't. And she's like, just breathe. You know what? Just breathe, 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 breathe. And so, like, anytime anybody, if anybody's listening, if you have a moment like that, like, that was kind of my, that's what I did. I would like, oh, I need to go the dog needs a walk. I just would excuse myself and let myself fall apart without, again, try to keep my brain out of it and let it be. Because when you're creating these new things, like you said, they're not going to feel the same.
Mm-mm.
And maybe you don't ever really love Chris. I mean, I don't know. I'm for, like, hey, there's no judgment. We're just being in the truth of who we are in each moment.
Yeah. Do you have Cracker Barrel where you are?
We do.
I'm not sure if I'm allowed back in one, because I went in right after Mom died to pick up supper. I cried. Like, you would have thought, like, my mom died in the car. Like, I wept and I cried, and I mean, I didn't really embarrass myself because I didn't care at that point, but I think I embarrassed a couple of the workers.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
like,
people don't know what to do with grief. That's a really good point. They don't know what to do.
yeah, Mom had bought a bedspread there. It was the only one we could find in Nashville, and I happened to be the same one. And I mean, they were really, like, even the customers were like, "Okay." I'm like, I don't care. But I was like, "My mom died." They're good when you say that. It's like, "Oh my gosh, okay, totally fine."
Then everybody gives a big wide pass.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I will also say, and I'm curious as to your experience, when Mom got sick, you live in hope. You have to live in hope. And I'm not saying, if you're watching this, that you shouldn't. Mine just happened to be a very rare aggressive type, and she was definitely an anomaly. But one of the ways I lived through it was by looking at my friends who had gone through it. And I was like, okay, you lived through this. You lived through this. And there were some very specific anchors that I had to show me that I could live through it. And with that, I felt a personal responsibility to share it on social media. I had one coach who's like, "You don't owe people anything. You don't have to share that." I was like, "Actually, I think in the nicest way I do, for me, because I know what I took." Hi. Water bottle. I know what I took from others, so I feel like I want to be that going forward. So, what about you? Did you feel like you did
It's so funny that you say that. Well, first of all, like I said, you going through the grieving, even though it was very different.
that?
And
Mhm.
there was a friend of mine too that was also going through, her mom had passed, and she was
Mhm.
very, very close with her too. And so very different than my relationship, but still, like, watching other people and having that permission, I hate to say it, but it's different, right? When you lose a
Mhm.
parent or what have you, all of a sudden the people who have lost parents, I had like 2 or 3 friends who had gone through it, and they showed up for me in ways that, it's like, first of all, the how are you question. It's like, can we just get rid of that question? Stop asking people how they, and
Oh,
even now
no.
at how are you with your mom? Or how are you, like, how do you think I am? Right?
Great.
Let's skip
Fabulous.
that question.
Terrific.
And so, like, what I found with them that was very different. Well, first of all, I think people also have very different responses to death. So people
Mhm,
that I thought would kind of rally with me, kind of MIA, which, hey, wasn't
mhm,
personal, obviously,
mhm,
but people had been through that, really did, like, they could drop something off at the door, right? Like some food for dinner and just be like, they weren't knocking on the door to see how I was. They were like, hey, I have a feeling you might need this tonight, or whatever the case may be. And what, like, being able to talk to them because they really did get it and they could offer, like you said, they're a little bit down the road from these things. They could offer perspective and just presence. I don't
mhm,
know, there's something about presence when you're grieving that I learned. It's like, it's not about trying to fix it for somebody. It's not trying to, it's like, try not to shut it down either, because so many people are uncomfortable. How can we just be present and allow it? And I don't know. I mean, for me, it was when I was younger. No, you shut anything like that, you just shut down. Thankfully, I have emerged before this in ways that give me permission, but I am with you. Like, find the people that you can absolutely connect with in this, because there's that conversation has a very different flavor. And not that other people can't be empathetic and compassionate, but there is a, I don't know. I felt it with my divorce too. When I
mhm,
went through that, people who had been through a divorce were, especially that first year, were very, very much like, they were the ones I would seek out and gravitate to when I was really
mhm.
struggling.
I know another thing that I remember mom specifically saying, and I think this is important for anyone listening to the conversation. Um, She said, "I just wish people would talk to me." Not about my cancer, not about being sick, just talk to me about stuff. She said, "Everyone's just like they just sort of change and they don't know how to act," and what ended up for her, she's like, "It's like I don't have any friends. It's like I have 2 friends or 3 because everyone else felt uncomfortable speaking to her
Yeah.
and or going you through us. Well, how is she doing?" I'm like, "Well, your guess is as good as mine. I don't know. Look, I mean, obviously, but yeah. And okay, speak of things that you don't want to answer. So this is twofold.
Okay.
If I ever hear, well, heaven just needed another angel, I'm probably
Oh, I'm with you. I'm so with you. Oh, it worked out in the best. They're not suffering anymore. I mean, there's a lot of platitudes out there that I think people mean well, but
there.
please
If
take
you'd
it off
help
the
your
table.
listeners. Which, yeah, not doing that. But anyway, so yeah.
No, and I agree. When my friend who died of cancer a couple years ago, it does. You notice everybody changed, right, around her because of this, and she was young, and she was had not a anomaly, but they had predicted, I think, she would maybe live about 3 months. She ended up living 18 months because she had this drive in her. She has two beautiful daughters. And she's like, I need to do certain things before I'm off this planet. And you get into these weird, awkward, I mean, grief and sadness and anger around all of the things. I mean, I think that's another really important piece, is like, it's okay to be angry at whomever or whatever, this is, as part of the process. And I know for me, anger is always like, ooh, that's the really ugly emotion. I don't really want to let that one out. But
Mhm.
my husband said, I don't remember seeing you ever the way you were that first year when you were grieving. You were, you just were, it was a very different, I don't know,
Yeah.
experience, journey of who I was. And
Mhm.
I remember about a year or so afterwards, and we were like laughing, like, pee your pants laughing.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
he's like, oh, your joy has returned. And he's like, I've missed that. I've missed your just unfiltered, unadulterated joy.
Oh,
And you just, again, you have to, like I said, well, I couldn't fake. Well, I don't want to fake it.
right.
And I think that's another thing about the holidays. Sometimes we try to fake it, put on a good smile and rally. And it's like, there's been times where it's like, I can't do this. Whether it's a holiday or a regular day, I was like,
Mhm.
I can't do that. And no longer would I ask myself to just put the smile on and get through something when I'm really, really not.
I think part of what you're saying is also when someone you love dies and you're in the throe of it, um, even like, we had the traditional Appalachian funeral with the viewing and then the grave. I don't know how everybody, I know it's different for everybody, but for those days after mom died and sort of in between the funeral and the viewing and her being buried, we had to take care of everybody else. You don't realize it, but it's like they're hugging you and they're weeping, and it's like, I know. But that's part of it. It's so interesting because you spend all this time dealing with what's coming, and then you realize that you also have to help everybody else is grieving because you represent it. And so I was very that became very apparent to me. Oh, I'm not only serving, like, I'm getting left out of this. I'm not serving myself, I'm serving everybody else who's grieving with me, which that was fine, but that got 2 weeks, and then I was like, "All right, I'm not taking care of anybody else anymore. Like, this is
Yes.
mine. I'm
Yes.
sorry for you, I appreciate you, but this is me." My boundaries got so much clearer, broke up with a friend. Like, how do you even do that? I was just like, "You know what? I don't have any more space. Like, I can't take you anymore." I mean, kind of almost said it. Like,
Yeah.
so it was kind of, I mean, that was when a lot of the anger came in and mostly, I mean, a lot because of the way she passed, and we lived in West Virginia. We're sure it was chemicals and all that junk that they played in. But then also again, like, I figure it out. I'm trying to figure it out too. But you
Yes.
can hear me. It's like you get that way,
Yep.
and you get tired of taking care of everybody else when you need to take care of yourself. And so I want to empower people to do that.
I couldn't agree. I had a moment like that a couple months in after my mother
Mhm.
died because I was kind of, again, some of the glue people were leaning on me, and I remember thinking, like, "I can't navigate my own grief and help you navigate yours."
Mhm.
And as much as because I was definitely the oldest sibling, right? Like, the kind of like this
Mhm.
caregiver, like, which over caregived for
Get
a
it.
very long time until I'm probably still practicing that, but I really did have a moment almost like that too, where it's like, I think I said to my husband, "I don't give a flying
Oh,
whatever about anybody else right now, this is
yeah.
about me." And I think you're right that even, like, the anger serves a really important part there to help us, because otherwise, then you're just, to me, I think I've seen people, you carry, carry, carry it, and then when do you actually get to fall apart and really experience kind of this messy grief if you're still in this, like, "Hey, I have to help everybody else through." It's like, nope. At a certain point, we're all at the cliff, and we're like, "Hey, I can't. You got to jump. I'm gonna jump." Hopefully, we'll see each other on the other
Y'all
side.
figure yourselves out. I cannot do that.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's That's so, yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
don't know about you, but ultimately I would say, so I didn't realize how much of our family dynamic that my mom shouldered. I
Mm,
thought I shouldered a lot of it. And so my dad has sort of, it's not like he's interested in a political party, it's more like he worships that, at the feet of it,
mm,
and that had caused so many problems for us. I mean, our whole family just like, "I don't know who you are anymore." It was one of those things, and my dad really stepped up when mom got sick. I mean, he was dead on. He honored her very well, but then we thought, "Oh, it's gonna be better, it's gonna be better," and now it's like we're also having to grieve part of my dad because he has changed so much. So it became a lot more than we expected. I have another friend who's going through the very same thing. Like, she's having to grieve her mom and grieve her mom's husband. That relationship. Did you have anything like that? Or
oh, yes, and
yeah.
actually, I've been no contact with my father for the last 2 years. Lots of things changed on the other side
Mm,
of
mhm,
her death, and for me, because there was a lot of trauma and abuse that had never been recognized, when
mm,
she died, I was like, "I am no longer the secret keeper." I am no longer the person that says, "Oh, that happened a long time ago. Oh, that was okay. Oh, this is a typical I was like, I refuse to do that. And it really then created another layer of, to your point, grieving, because it was like whatever kind of quasi unit we all had going, whatever kind of toxic maybe dynamics, some codependency, throw that in there too. I was like, I no longer stand. This is my way of changing, being, really embodying the change that I want. As I've been kind of trying to pull out of that, but her death kind of just was like 3 days after she died, I was laying in bed and I heard a message that said, Stace, this is going to set you free. You're going to be walking through a lot of mess first, but this event, her not being on the planet, is going to open your visibility and you're going to feel much braver than you've ever felt. And you're going to live in the ways that you already feel are kind of growing inside of you. And so that created a very different dynamic, and especially because at the time I suspected my mother had committed suicide, but it didn't get confirmed until a couple months later. So
Mhm.
there were a lot of different opinions about what happened, who would, all the things.
Yeah.
And I just had to say, I just need to stay in my own lane here. But it did create, to your point, a huge other secondary thing that I think my mother, because she had so much mental illness, I didn't realize kind of my father's role as well, because
Mhm.
my mother kind of overshadowed that. And then when she was gone, it was like, oh, wait, now the spotlight is on you. And it's a very interesting thing. And just how he chose to navigate. And then how I just like, I'm not, I'm not pretending anymore.
Mhm. Oh, yeah.
I've done that, been there, done that, and at the cost to myself. And so, yeah, so I think for me, like, again, it's taken years for me. This event has been like a huge seismic event in my life for a variety of reasons.
Yeah. I mean, like you talk about secrets, I always say that my family trafficked in secrets,
Mm,
and yeah, it was about that time, I was like, "I'm sick of it. If
yeah,
y'all have something to ask each other about, don't I don't wanna be in the middle of this anymore.
exactly.
Just have at it. My life experience, I can't give my life experience up to help yours. This is your life experience."
Yeah.
So, yeah,
And
and family.
everybody's gotta be in charge. Like, I just was like, "You know what? If you tell me something, don't say, 'And this is a secret, and don't tell so and so, and don't blah, blah, blah,' or half tell something." I was like, "I'm done. I am
Mhm,
done in all of this." And it was funny because I was the first one a year after my mom died. I was like, "I'm going to speak publicly about this because it's part of my life experience." And
mhm,
so far, no, right? Everybody, it was a big secret. So I was like, "I am not gonna just carry this
mm,
way." And it did reverberate back on me, and I just was willing to
mhm,
stand in whatever that was, which I know you and I both have stood in lots of
yeah,
situations where it's just like, you know what, I'm gonna be okay. I'm gonna navigate I'm gonna navigate through, and like you said, there's people around that show us that, hey, that's possible. And I also believe too, there's a part of us when you really go through something like this that just kind of rises up. I don't know if you had this experience. It just like rose up within me. It's like, you're gonna be okay. Like it's not
mhm,
gonna be fun for a while, but you're absolutely like, you carrying all of this the way you did is not actually serving you. And why not the next
mhm,
second half of your life have a lot more
yeah,
lighter bags on
yeah. I mean,
the journey?
in coaching, we always we're taught, and it takes a lot of trying on, that we're not responsible for other people's thoughts. We're not responsible for other people's feelings because they get to choose what they want. And I've always been able to coach people on that, and have done that myself. But it wasn't until I had such a profound loss that I really, really, really got it. I'm like, oh, this is what I've got to say, and if it doesn't work for you, then I empower you to move on, do what you
Exactly.
gotta do, but this is how it's gonna look for me.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's definitely a part of that is it's very freeing in a way that you don't necessarily wanna be freed, but then
Agreed.
it's like, you
Agreed.
gotta
It changes you. I
it
mean, just to me, it changes you, and you can't put it back, right? You can't put the genie back into the bottle. So
yeah,
it's just like at some point, you're just like, okay, this is part of who I am or whatever this is. And it just, I mean, to me, it feels like another death, and been talking a lot about death and rebirth lately on the podcast. It's like another death and rebirth. I'm like, did I check all the boxes when I came here this time?
Yeah, they really do. Something like this would have helped me, when I was going through, and two people talking about it, and still being able to laugh and then being honest. Like this type of conversation would have really helped me too. So I know that both of us were cognizant of that, even having this conversation in front of people. But yeah.
It was funny. I did not tell you this, I don't think, but whenever, I can't remember when I reached out to you, but like I was walking as I always do, talking to myself, spirits, whatever. And I was like, I want to really have some guests on the podcast coming up that I feel like, again, these really honest conversations. And literally it popped into my head. It was not me. Popped into my head. They're like, you and Belinda need to have a conversation about grieving. And I was like, oh, this is a great idea. And I was like, well, let me see if Belinda agrees.
Yeah, well, I got your message. I was like, of course. Yes, of course.
Yeah. But it was funny because, and not that I had never thought of you, but it was just like, it was like very specific. It was like, this is what you're going to do. This is who you're going to talk to. And I agree with you. I would have benefited so much to hear two people talk. Again, there's joy, there's laughter, we're being super honest about it all as well too, because it does give you this space to be like, okay, I can navigate whatever this is, and it doesn't have to look like anybody else's path. And I think I always take that away. It's like grief is such a very personal experience. And I even going in and talking, like, again, you and I both have like, well, is that for you? Or how did you feel about that? Because we would never even assume that we would have exactly or similar experiences, because they are such different moments for all of us.
And sorry.
So no, I was going to say thank you for being here. I'm sure everybody listening, is going to take something away from this. If people want, if they don't know you, Belinda, and they're not already, again, because you are a beacon of magical energy out on social media. When I need a good laugh, when I need a good just like, hey, call it like it is, I gravitate toward you, because it is such a beautiful, again, real but joy-filled energy. Where can people find you?
Well, obviously on the throne in my kingdom.
Exactly.
If you're on Instagram, I'm Belinda Unhooked. If you're on Facebook, it's Unhooked Life. I would also advise you to try to get on my personal page. Request my friendship is Belinda Lee Lee Smith.
We'll put that in the show notes for people.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So yes, come into Belinda's world. Let us know what you think about this podcast. Thank you so much, Belinda, for being here today. It was, again, I think a conversation that a lot of us really, really, maybe not enjoy, but it's part of the fabric of most of our lives, especially as we're getting older.
Yes. Or younger.
Yeah, well, this is true. Thank you. You need to just come on here every day. We'll have a great old time.
We'll do grief talking all the time and laugh.
Exactly. Thanks, Belinda.
And that's a wrap. Thank you so much for tuning in. Get all the delicious details and links we've mentioned in this episode in the show notes below. If you'd like to chat about this episode or learn more about how to work with me, come visit me in my private Facebook group, Everyday Enchantment, or check out my website, staceyandon.com, where you can find out more about my Leap of Faith coaching, my Map Makers group program, and the School of Intuitive Magic. Plus a special shout out for all the production and editing of this show by Richard Wilmore. That's it for now, love. Here's to living a life enchanted. See you soon.